Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the cold glass of the Arecibo Observatory's control room window, watching the massive dish rotate slowly against the Puerto Rican dawn. As Earth's lead xenolinguist, she'd spent 15 years dreaming of this moment first contact. She just hadn't imagined it would come as a threat. "Play it again, Marcus," she said to her colleague, Dr. Marcus Chun, who hunched over banks of quantum processors that hummed with alien mathematics. The translation materialized in holographic text above the console, each word precise and terrifying. "Species designation. Human. Your chaotic transmissions contaminate the cosmic frequencies. The hegemony of Zephyros grants you 30 rotations to cease all electromagnetic emissions beyond your planetary boundary. Non-compliance will result in systematic eradication. This is your only warning." Elena's stomach churned. For decades, Earth had been broadcasting everything: television shows, radio programs, internet data streams, even personal communications bouncing off satellites. The aliens had been listening, and they were disgusted. The signal originated from 12 different star systems simultaneously, Marcus said, his usually steady voice cracking. "They're not just one species, Elena. This is an alliance." Across the world, similar scenes played out in observatories, military installations, and government bunkers. In Geneva, the United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session. General Patricia Hayes, head of the newly formed Planetary Defense Initiative, stood before a wall of monitors showing global military assets being mobilized, a pathetic display of human technology compared to beings who could coordinate across light years. "Options?" Secretary General Maria Santos asked the assembled delegates. "We could try to negotiate," suggested Ambassador Chun Wei, though his voice lacked conviction. "With what leverage?" General Hayes shot back. "They've demonstrated faster than light communication and the ability to monitor our entire electromagnetic spectrum. We're essentially naked to them." Meanwhile, in a cluttered communication center in Boulder, Colorado, 26-year-old Jamie Rodriguez sat surrounded by towers of outdated equipment, jury-rigged antennas, and empty coffee cups. As a junior technician at the Deep Space Communications Array, Jamie wasn't supposed to be monitoring the alien transmission frequencies. But curiosity had always been both Jamie's greatest asset and biggest flaw. 30 rotations, Jamie muttered, fingers dancing across multiple keyboards. That's about 26 Earth days, considering their apparent orbital mechanics. While world leaders debated and generals planned, Jamie began crafting something unprecedented. Not a formal diplomatic response or a military threat, but a compilation of humanity's most authentic moments. Security footage of a child's first steps, a teenager's cracking voice during a school presentation, an elderly man weeping with joy at his granddaughter's wedding, people helping strangers change flat tires in thunderstorms, musicians playing off-key but with pure passion. "This is insane," Jamie whispered, uploading terabytes of what the world would consider embarrassing failures and vulnerable moments. But maybe that's exactly what we need to be. The transmission protocol was simple. Jamie had been monitoring the alien frequencies for weeks, understanding their communication patterns. As the compilation finished uploading, Jamie added a simple text message. "This is who we are. We're messy, we're learning, and we're trying our best. If that's worth destroying, then we accept your judgment. Without authorization, without consultation, without any authority beyond human conscience." Jamie hit the transmit button and sent Earth's most honest message into the cosmos. Light years away, in the crystalline command center of the hegemony. Flagship Eternal Harmony. Supreme Coordinator Vex Thill received Earth's transmission during the most important military briefing in galactic history. The Zephyrian six sensory stalks recoiled as the human data Stream began playing across the chamber's holographic displays. "Shut it off," commanded War Leader Croton, his chitinous exoskeleton clicking with agitation. The insectoid Cytherian had advocated for immediate human extinction from the beginning. This is clearly a psychological warfare tactic. But Vexthul raised a delicate, translucent hand. "Wait, let it continue." The assembled representatives of the 12 hegemony species watched in uncomfortable silence as humanity's most vulnerable. Moments played out before them. A human child stumbling while learning to walk, then laughing as her parents applauded. A young male's voice cracking during what appeared to be a ritual recitation, his face flushing with embarrassment before, continuing with determination. An elderly female breaking down in tears of joy at an unexpected gathering. Elder Zixanar, the ancient cerebrillian whose massive brain pulsed with bioluminescent thoughts, spoke in perfect telepathic harmony. "I do not understand. Why would they? BROADCAST their ... inefficiencies?" On the other side of the galaxy, Dr. Elena Vasquez had finally traced the unauthorized transmission back to Jamie's station. She burst into the Boulder facility to find Jamie calmly organizing files, as if nothing had happened. "Do you realize what you've done?" Elena demanded. "You've just committed humanity to a course of action without any governmental approval." Jamie looked up with tired but determined eyes. "Dr. Vasquez, I've been monitoring their communication patterns for weeks. The hegemony species don't just talk to each other, they perform for each other. Every message is perfectly crafted, strategically optimal. They've forgotten how to be real. And you think showing them our failures will somehow save us? I think showing them our humanity might remind them of theirs." Back on the Eternal Harmony, something unprecedented was happening. For the first time in recorded hegemony history, the High Council chamber had fallen completely silent. Not the tactical silence of strategic planning, but the profound quiet of beings confronting something they'd forgotten existed. The transmission showed a human musician playing a stringed instrument with obvious technical flaws, but the emotion pouring from the performance made several council members' biosignatures spike with unfamiliar sensations. A human couple arguing, then embracing, then laughing at their own foolishness. Workers stopping their tasks to help a stranger whose vehicle had malfunctioned. "They're not optimizing their behaviors," whispered Silandra, the ethereal, whose energy-based form flickered with confusion. They're choosing inefficiency." War Leader Croton's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme distress. "This is exactly why they must be eliminated. They're contaminating the cosmic order with their chaos." But Supreme Coordinator Vexthul was studying the biometric readings from the council chamber. Every species representative showed elevated stress responses, but not from disgust or anger. The readings indicated something the hegemony had systematically eliminated from their civilization centuries ago: nostalgia. "Council dismissed," Vexthul announced suddenly. "I require contemplation time." As the various species filed out, each lost in their own thoughts, none noticed that Elder Zixanar had quietly begun accessing the cerebrillian cultural archives files that had been sealed for over 3 centuries. Elder Zixanar's massive brain pulsed with Forbidden's memories as he navigated the deepest levels of the cerebrillian cultural archives. The ancient files, locked away since his species had achieved perfect logical efficiency, contained videos of young cerebrillian children before their neural enhancement procedures. The footage showed them playing games without purpose, creating art without function, and most shocking of all, laughing. "We called it the purification," Zixanar whispered to himself, his telepathic voice echoing through the empty archive chamber. "We told ourselves we were evolving beyond primitive emotions." Similar scenes were unfolding across the hegemony fleet. On the Cytherian warship Absolute Victory, War Leader Croton found himself compulsively accessing historical records of his species' pre-militaristic period. The files showed Cytherians engaged in elaborate courtship dances, creating intricate art with their natural silk secretions, and caring for their young with what could only be described as tenderness. Weakness, Croton muttered, but his biosigns told a different story. His stress pheromones indicated not disgust, but longing. Meanwhile, on Earth, the consequences of Jamie's unauthorized transmission were spiraling beyond anyone's control. World leaders who had been preparing for either surrender or futile resistance were now dealing with something far more complex: silence from the aliens, and growing chaos among their own populations. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood before an emergency. Joint session of the United Nations, trying to explain the inexplicable. The hegemony's communication pattern has changed completely. Instead of their usual coordinated multi-species transmissions, we're detecting individual signals from each of their 12 worlds. They appear to be talking to themselves. General Hayes leaned forward. Is that good or bad for us? I honestly don't know, Elena admitted. But I've been analyzing the frequency patterns, and there's something remarkable happening. Each species is accessing what appears to be their own historical archives. In Boulder, Jamie was working frantically to monitor the alien communications while dodging increasingly frantic calls from government officials. What Jamie had discovered was extraordinary. The hegemony wasn't just reviewing their archives. They were experiencing what humans would recognize as a collective identity crisis. Look at this, Jamie said to Elena, who had rushed back to the facility. The ethereal named Silandra has been broadcasting continuous transmissions to her home world for 16 hours straight. But it's not military or strategic communication. It's poetry. The translation appeared on their screens. In the time before perfection, we danced among the star streams, our essence flowing like liquid light through cosmic winds. We sang songs that served no purpose but joy. We touched the void with wonder, not conquest. Elena stared at the words. They're remembering what they used to be. Across the galaxy, the hegemony's perfect alliance was experiencing its first major fracture in millennia. Species that had spent centuries in lockstep coordination were beginning to question not just their mission to destroy humanity, but their entire way of existence. On the Aquarian vessel Perpetual Tide, Navigator Fluxora found herself crying, an ability her species had surgically removed from their physiology 300 years ago. The tears were artificial, produced by emergency biological systems that had been dormant for generations, but the emotion behind them was devastatingly real. We used to sing to the whales, she whispered to her empty command chamber, reviewing footage of ancient Aquarians before their optimization. We used to dance with the currents just because it felt beautiful. The human transmission had done more than just show the hegemony what humanity was like. It had forced them to confront what they had lost in their pursuit of perfection. Each species began secretly accessing their own sealed cultural archives, rediscovering art, music, poetry, and most dangerous of all, the capacity for what humans called love. Supreme Coordinator Vexthil called an emergency council session, but for the first time in hegemony history, not all species representatives attended. Some were too busy rediscovering their own forgotten heritage to remember their military obligations. We have a problem, Vexthil announced to the half-empty chamber. The human transmission has triggered complications in our operational efficiency. War leader Croton, whose own certainty was cracking, tried to maintain his aggressive stance. Then we accelerate the timeline. We destroy them now before their chaos spreads further. But Elder Zixanar, whose massive brain was now processing not just logical data, but emotional memories, had a different perspective. Perhaps the question is not whether we should destroy them, but whether we should thank them. The chamber fell silent. In the hegemony's perfect military hierarchy, Such a statement bordered on treason. They have reminded us, Zixanar continued, of what we were before we became what we thought we should be. Asterisk, the hegemony's perfect unity shattered like crystalline glass hitting a resonant frequency. Within hours of Elder Zixanar's heretical suggestion, 3 of the 12 species had withdrawn their ships from the formation surrounding Earth. The Ethereals, led by Silandra, had begun broadcasting experimental poetry across subspace frequencies. The Aquarians, under Navigator Fluxara's influence, were attempting to re-establish contact with their planets. Cetacean population, a species they had ignored for centuries in favor of stellar navigation. Most shocking of all, the Crystalline Collective had begun to sing. Supreme Coordinator Vexthal stood alone in the flagship's command center, watching his alliance dissolve into something unprecedented. Individuals making choices based on emotion rather than efficiency. His own bio-readings showed dangerous fluctuations as suppressed Zephyrian instincts fought against centuries of conditioning. "Status report," he commanded, though his voice lacked its usual authoritative resonance. "The Cerebrillian fleet has moved to a non-aggressive posture," reported his aide, a young Zephyrian named Kylef, whose sensory stalks quivered with barely contained confusion. "They're requesting permission to attempt communication with the humans." "Communication?" Vexthal's stalks contracted. "We don't communicate with primitives. We conquer or we eliminate." But even as he spoke the words, Vexthal found himself thinking about the human transmission. The image of the elderly human female, crying with joy at her surprise gathering, had triggered something in his neural pathways, a memory of his own grandmother before the Great Optimization, when Zephyrians still celebrated individual achievements rather than collective efficiency. On Earth, the situation was equally chaotic. Government officials who had been preparing for either surrender or annihilation were now dealing with something their contingency plans had never anticipated. Aliens having what appeared to be a collective nervous breakdown. Dr. Elena Vasquez had established a round-the-clock monitoring station in Boulder, working alongside Jamie to track the unprecedented dissolution of the galaxy's most feared military alliance. The data was staggering. 17 different species are now broadcasting on formerly restricted frequencies. Elena reported to the emergency UN session via hologram. "We're receiving everything from what appears to be confessional poetry to requests for cultural exchange." General Hayes, who had spent months preparing for humanity's final battle, found herself in the surreal position of potentially coordinating a peaceful first contact with multiple alien civilizations simultaneously. "What's our protocol for this?" "We trained for invasion, not ... whatever this is." "There is no protocol," Elena admitted. "We're making it up as we go along." In the hegemony fleet, the situation was becoming increasingly unstable. War leader Croton, despite his own wavering certainty, was attempting to maintain military discipline. Among species that were rediscovering concepts like artistic expression and personal choice. "This is madness," he declared during an emergency council session attended by only 7 of the 12 species. "One transmission from a primitive world and our entire alliance collapses." "Perhaps," said Elder Zixanar, whose massive brain was now openly processing emotional data alongside logical parameters, "it was never as strong as we believed." The breaking point came when the youngest member of the hegemony, a recently ascended species called the Luminari, made an unprecedented announcement. Their representative, a being of pure energy called Brightwing, flickered with colors that had never been seen in official hegemony communications. "We withdraw from the destruction protocol," Brightwing announced, their form shifting through spectrums that conveyed concepts the hegemony had no words for. "The humans have shown us something we had forgotten we possessed, the courage to be imperfect." War leader Croton's exoskeleton cracked audibly. "You're committing treason against the cosmic order." No, Brightwing replied, their energy form dancing with newfound freedom. We're committing to life. The council chamber erupted in chaos as species representatives began openly questioning not just their mission, but their entire civilizations. Philosophy. 3 more species withdrew from the Alliance within the hour. On Earth, Jamie had been monitoring the alien communications with growing amazement. Dr. Vasquez, you need to see this. The hegemony isn't just falling apart. They're actively helping each other rediscover their pre-optimization cultures. Eleni looked at the data streaming across their screens. The ethereals were teaching the crystalline collective about energy-based art forms. The Aquarians were sharing flow dynamics with species that had forgotten how to move with natural grace. The Cerebrillians were opening their archives to any species that wanted to understand emotional consequences of forced neural optimization. It's like they're having a galactic renaissance, Jamie whispered. And we accidentally started it. But not everyone in the hegemony was embracing this cultural awakening. War Leader Croton, Supreme Coordinator Vexthol, and 4 other species representatives had formed what they called the Purity Coalition, a desperate attempt to maintain their original mission and prevent what they saw as the contamination of galactic civilization. If we cannot maintain order through unity, Croton declared to his remaining allies, then we will impose it through force. The galaxy's most feared military alliance was about to go to war with itself, and Earth was. Caught in the middle, asterisk. The civil war within the hegemony lasted exactly 14 minutes. War Leader Croton had expected his Purity Coalition to engage in glorious battle against the contaminated species. But what actually happened was something no military strategist in galactic history had prepared for. The enemy refused to fight back. Instead of returning fire, the Cerebrillians broadcast mathematical poetry. The ethereals responded to weapons fire with light sculptures that told the story of their species' forgotten joy. The Aquarians sent whale songs, actual recordings, from their homeworld's ancient archives, when their people had lived in harmony with their planet's natural inhabitants. Fire on them, Croton commanded his gunners, but his own crew was beginning to fracture. Young Cytherians, who had only known military efficiency, were hearing their ancestors' courtship songs for the first time, and their genetic programming was responding in ways that centuries of conditioning couldn't suppress. The final moment came when the crystalline collective, led by a being called Resonance Deed, began to sing the song of becoming a harmonic frequency that told the story of their species, evolution from simple mineral structures to sentient beings capable of love. The music was so beautiful, so deeply moving, that it reached frequencies that touched the emotional centers of every species in the galaxy. War Leader Croton's mandibles stopped clicking. His weapons powered down. For the first time in 3 centuries, a Cytherian warrior began to weep. "Stand down," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the cosmic symphony. "All forces, stand down." On Earth, the transformation of the galaxy's most feared military alliance was being watched in real time by every government, every observatory, and every person with access to the communication networks. The images were extraordinary. Warships whose weapons had been converted into broadcast arrays, soldiers teaching each other traditional dances, and commanders openly sharing their species' most treasured cultural artifacts. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the Boulder facility, watching data streams that showed not military maneuvers, but something unprecedented, a galaxy-wide cultural exchange program. "Jamie," she said softly, "I think we just witnessed the birth of a new kind of civilization." Jamie, who had been monitoring the alien communications for 72 hours straight, looked up with tired but amazed eyes. "They're not just sharing culture, Dr. Vasquez. They're creating new forms of it. The ethereals and the crystalline collective are collaborating on art that requires both energy and mineral consciousness. The Aquarians and the Cerebrilians are working together on mathematical models that incorporate emotional variables. The first official communication from the transformed hegemony came not from Supreme Coordinator Vex Thul, but from a collective consciousness that included representatives from all 12 species. The message was simple: we request permission to learn. The United Nations, which had been preparing for either surrender or annihilation, found itself instead organizing the galaxy's first interspecies cultural exchange program. Earth's most embarrassing moments, the transmission that had started it all, became the foundation for something unprecedented, a galactic civilization based not on perfection, but on the courage to be authentically imperfect. Within months, the transformation was complete. The hegemony of Zephyros became the alliance of becoming, a voluntary association of species committed to helping each other rediscover what they had lost in their pursuit of efficiency. Earth wasn't just accepted into this new alliance. It became its spiritual center, the place where beings from across the galaxy came to learn what humans had never forgotten: how to fail beautifully, how to try again, and how to find joy in the attempt. Supreme Coordinator Vex Thul, who had renamed himself Student of Wonder, established the first interspecies university on Earth, where young beings from a dozen worlds came to study subjects that had been banned for centuries: art, music, poetry, and the complex emotional mathematics of love. War leader Croton became professor of peaceful conflict resolution, teaching courses on how to transform aggressive instincts into creative energy. His students included former soldiers from across the galaxy who were learning to dance instead of march, to sing instead of shout orders, to build instead of destroy. And in Boulder, Colorado, Jamie Rodriguez continued to monitor the cosmos, now as Earth's Director of Intergalactic Communications. The makeshift equipment and empty coffee cups remained, but the purpose had transformed. Instead of detecting threats, Jamie now facilitated the endless stream of cultural exchange between Earth and its galactic neighbors. "You know what the best part is?" Jamie said to Elena during one of their regular status meetings. "We never had to pretend to be perfect. We just had to be honest about being imperfect." Elena smiled, looking out at the sky where ships from a dozen worlds now regularly visited Earth, not as conquerors, but as students. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is just being authentically yourself. The galaxy had learned humanity's greatest lesson, that the courage to be vulnerable, to fail, to try again, and to help others do the same, was not a weakness to be eliminated, but a strength to be celebrated. In their desperate attempt to save their world, humans had accidentally saved the galaxy from the sterile perfection that had been slowly killing it for centuries. And in the end, the most powerful weapon against fear turned out to be laughter, the sound of beings across the cosmos learning to be beautifully, imperfectly, gloriously alive. Asterisk.